Marilyn Mishka. As I said, she was born in nearby San Pedro, California. And she studied elementary education, and she began her career as a second-grade teacher. But she also studied classical singing with the great Lonnie Lehman, the same teacher who taught Marilyn horn. And soon Marilyn Mishka ended up pursuing her love of opera, where she went to, where else? New York City. Seems that's where serious musicians go, isn't it? But Mishka never wanted to go to Europe to make a name for herself the way most international opera singers do. She wanted to carve out her niche on these shores, and so she stuck to singing right here in the good old US of A. In the 60s and 70s, there was no internet. You had to have a recording career. That was the only way you could make an international name for yourself, was to have a recording contract with the likes of RCA or Deutsche Grammophon or someplace. All of these contracts were already taken when Marilyn Mishka from Southern California got to New York City. So Miss Mishka, with her big, fabulous voice, became known as a utilitarian singer, kind of always on call, always filling in. She contented herself with singing a Mother Superior from Sound of Music here, or a wedding singer from Stephen Sondheim Show Company there. But she sang wherever she could sing in New York, and she loved to sing at her little favorite opera house, a place called New York City Opera. Well, one day New York City Opera's big sister, the prestigious Metropolitan Opera, was offering Puccini's Tosca. The international singing and recording star, who was all set to fly from Europe and wow the crowd, missed her flight. Her understudy was in New York, but she had a cold. So the Met hunted down some little singer that people had heard was singing around town, the utilitarian, the lonely Marilyn Mishka. And at the last minute, they offered her the role. And they said, Miss Mishka, you will have no rehearsal. You will have no coaching from the conductor. But you will be singing on stage with a tenor who has a bit of a reputation. His name is Luciano Pavarotti. So, like everything else in New York, it was big news. So people were turning in their tickets at the box office because nobody wanted to hear a nobody sing with Pavarotti. And just as quickly, other people were snapping up the tickets because they wanted to hear a nobody sing. Miss Mishka did not disappoint. From the moment she hit that stage, she was passionate and fiery and coquettish and lovely, with voice to spare. Mr. Pavarotti was great because that's what he does, but Miss Mishka was singing the title role. When you sing the title role, you take the final bow. She not only took the last bow, but she took bow after bow after bow after bow. They wouldn't let her leave the stage. You know, America loves an underdog. And Marilyn Mishka from Southern California was spectacular. Reviews can make or break performance. But everybody who was there knew these reviews would have to be amazing because they had seen and heard her with their own ears and their own eyes. The next day, the New York Times, the New York Post, and the New York Daily News said, Marilyn Mishka is a familiar singer around New York City. She's an available singer. And although she had an amazing night last night, she is not a major singer. Any open-minded person knew that singing like that did not just happen in a vacuum. They were in the presence of a consistently great performer. Besides, aren't amazing nights the very substance that identifies major singers? They knew her. They had heard her last night. She was astounding. But they had no faith in her. So her reviews were not good. And so without those reviews, without their faith in her, she could do very, very little. In the text that Fred read in our hearing, Jesus had just finished a time of teaching and preaching and healing around the Sea of Galilee. He had fed the 5,000. He had healed the blind man on the road. He had calmed the sea. And as we heard last week when our guest preachers were here, he had even brought Jairus' daughter back to life. So Jesus returned home to Nazareth. And on the Sabbath, Jesus went to his hometown and went straight to the synagogue where he began to reveal the scriptures. Now, the Gospel of Mark does not record what Jesus says, but the Gospel of Luke does. And you've probably heard it. It goes like this. Jesus unrolled the scroll and read, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And then Jesus rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. And the eyes of everybody in the temple were on him. And then Jesus looked at them and said, "Today, the scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." Jesus gave his call story. And you know hometown people. You know how they act. They began by responding, "Wow, how tuned into God this Jesus is. What a glorious thing we have heard that he has done all around the Sea of Galilee. He has healed and he's brought back to life. He has had an amazing season." But wait a minute. Isn't that Jesus, the Jesus that grew up here in Nazareth? Isn't that Jesus, Mary and Joseph's son? He has always been around here. We know his sisters. They still live here. Isn't he the utilitarian carpenter in our little hometown who would build our furniture and repair it when it broke? Who then is he to declare that he is the messenger of God? Who is he, after all of our waiting and all of our praying and all of our longing for a Messiah, who is he to take it upon himself to proclaim that this is the year of the Lord's favor? Oh, like Marilyn Mishka knew. They had known him from before. They had no faith in him. So Jesus' reviews were not very good. They were not good at all. And so without their faith, he could do very little, the scripture says. From friends and from family, from those closest to him, Jesus experienced firsthand the power of inhospitality. And it left him nearly powerless. I told the 5 o'clock service last night, even though I am referred to here in the Pacific Southwest as the Reverend Dr. Bill Thomas, and I serve as the vice moderator on the regional board for the Southern California Pacific Southwest region. When I go home, there are those in my congregation who are all too happy to point out, "Oh, here comes that used-to-be actor who's now a preacher in Southern California." That doesn't leave you in a very powerful place, does it? 21 centuries later, is the power of yours and mine, is the power of our inhospitality to each other, is that power frustrating the very power of Jesus? How inhospitable at the beginning of the 20th century the Ku Klux Klan must have seemed to early 20th century Americans who came north looking for a job. It didn't help that no less a president than Woodrow Wilson was showing the racist film Birth of a Nation in the White House. How inhospitable humans must have looked to Jews who were forced into ghettos and separated from their children and executed, while for years the rest of the world chose not to get involved. How inhospitable you and I must look now to migrant workers crossing the border. Yes, some of them don't have papers. Yes, some of them have broken the law. But inhospitable we must look to migrant workers who are willing to do jobs that none of us in here would do. We're not going to pick berries. In the midst of Jesus' own experience with inhospitality, mindful of how faith and grace work together, Jesus sent out the 12. Jesus used his own experience of the powerful inhospitality from his home folk as a teaching moment for his disciples. He sent out the 12 to minister, telling them, go with very little to offer. Take very little clothing and very little food. Go to the first house you see. Don't look for a better house or a better family. And minister to those people. If they believe your message and receive you, you will do a mighty teaching there. You will perform great healing there. But if they reject you, if they laugh at you and don't believe you, you leave and shake the dust from your feet because there's nothing you can do there. But you try. You go tell your call story about how God, through Jesus Christ, has changed you. You let them know that you were there to release the captive, to proclaim recovery of sight to the blind, and to let the oppressed go free. Let whatever faith that they may have then interact with God's grace. Not too long ago, Michael Kosick and I were in a department store in New York City. And we were walking through the store, and this young man rushed up to us with a bottle with an atomizer on it, and he was intent on spraying as much heavy cologne on us as he possibly could. He was just selling cologne. So after we finally went through, we started talking, and we asked him where he was from. He was a Russian Jew who also happened to be gay, who had left Russia for fear of his life. He couldn't go back to visit his parents. He couldn't go back to see his family because of the fact that he was a Jew and the fact that he was gay. He was in great danger there. So he asked us what we did. And we told him that we were both pastors in Southern California. And I was ready because I knew he was going to say, how can you be a pastor in such an oppressive religion in a country where there's so much going on? And I had my card out that said Reverend Dr. William Thomas Jr. from Little White Chapel, and I was going to tell him what a progressive church this was and how I lamented and my heart broke over what he was going through, but he could find refuge here, and so and we got you covered, and welcome, welcome, welcome. But he didn't ask me that. He asked me, how did you find your call? How did you hear God's voice calling you? Well, that knocked the wind out of me because I was not expecting that. I had to go back and figure out what my call story was. I had to go back and on the spot tell him how God's favor rested on me to call God's children to come to God. I had to figure out that very personal story. I had to tell him how I was knocked to my knees and I had no other place to go except to Christ. And Christ said, I will save you if you make yourself a vehicle for other people. You and I, in a world that continually disagrees with each other, are being called to have our call story at the ready. And it doesn't matter whether people receive us or not. It doesn't matter whether people like us or not. It doesn't matter if people think we are strange because we worship God. It doesn't matter. Our job is simply to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord. To be witnesses to what God has done in us. God then will take care of everything else. God, we are called to be people of faith at a time when being a person of faith is not always easy. There are people willing to assail and confront and disrespect the church, not only outside the church, but also inside. Help us to find our call story and help us to have ready at all times our story of witness of how you have changed us and transformed us into your followers, into your people.